Hello and welcome, Meta Chasers, to Matchup Plus Plus, the 6 Plus Plus show that tries to show you how you match up to the 40k tournament meta. I'm Jack, and I'm once again joined by Chris.
Hello.
And this week we're going to be covering Grey Knights. As this is why I've brought Chris in as a preeminent Grey Knight main.
Grey Knight main, well known for it on the circuit, in fact. Yeah. It's one of the...
We're gonna be see if we can break this one down. It came in by request from the comments on our previous video on Necrons, so I wanted to cover that one. So if you do have anything you want us to cover, by all means put it in the comments down below. And while you're there, you can subscribe.
Oh yeah, maybe become a member. Ooh.
Yeah, get early access to videos. It's great. So let's just dive straight into it then. Grey Knights. What do they perform best into? Let's get the stats. I bet we all love the stats. So, in terms of performing best, what it performs best into, we've got Eldari with a 68% win rate. We've got Death Guard with a 70% win rate. We've got Space Marines with a 55% win rate. And then their worst performing games are against Custodes with 43% win rate, Tau Empire with 36% win rate, and Astra Militarum with a 36% win rate. To leave us with an overall win rate of 51%, play rate of 3%, and 2 event wins. So, what jumps out for you on the best performers list there, Chris?
Yeah, so having played Eldar for most of the editions so far, this isn't any sort of surprise. There was a reason that USA took Grey Knights and surprised everyone at WTC, even when Eldar were at their peak, and that was the fact that Grey Knights could give them a game with 30 Terminators. They just play the mission so well in terms of like the secondaries that they've just got a game into everything. In terms of Eldar, it's that jumping around and hitting them when the Eldar think they're safe. Eldar like to hide and jump out and scurry away, but the fact that the Grey Knights can drop down and just delete anything they want. I mean, I actually recently played a game against myself because I'm really cool, and I played my Grey Knights into my Eldar, and it was just like as soon as the Eldar came out to try and kill some of the Grey Knight stuff, they just got immediately pummeled into oblivion on the fight back. And it's just brutal because the Eldar don't quite have the right guns necessarily to deal with it. They can get out muscled on primary, and Grey Knights are one of the armies that can definitely go toe to toe with them in the secondary game. So yeah, I'm really not surprised with that one at all.
Yeah, I mean, you have to imagine. We look at Eldari's strengths. It's one of the biggest ones is mobility and playing secondaries, which is something that Grey Knights also want to do, and arguably do it just as well or better. So they're going to beat them at their own game. And then similarly for weaknesses of the Grey Knights, the notorious weakness of the Grey Knights is their lack of damage output. Historically, that's what the problem been. But those strength 4 bolters still do a lot of damage. Those storm bolters do a lot of damage to Eldari units. That resilient, that lack of damage output is less of an issue against such a fragile faction.
The Flamers as well now on the Dread Knights.
The
If people are running somewhere between 3 and 6 Dread Knights, and there's 2 D6 Flamers pointed at all angles and can come down 3 inches away. You got your Terminators with Flamers, potentially your Paladins with Flamers. There's just Flamers everywhere, which as an Eldar player, and I mean another thing is Eldar love to move block, and that doesn't really work against Grey Knights. So because they're either teleporting or they're advancing and gaining fly. So yeah, they've got that matchup on lockdown.
All right. Next, we've got Death Guard here. I think that this one is probably actually for a very similar reason, right? So, whereas Eldari kind of get outplayed at their own game on the mobility and secondary factor, I think the Death Guard are just so heavily outplayed on the mobility and the secondary factor that they kind of tend to lose a lot of those games. And you have to imagine the kind of play style that Death Guard go for. If they try and shoot units, if they try and charge into units because everything's quite slow, they've got to get quite close. It's going to cause a lot of problems with the Grey Knights just using their movement shenanigans to get away and just kind of like fighting mist, so to speak.
It can kind of like play the angles, play the corners, stay out of contagion range as best as possible because of the teleportation, mists away, sigil of executions. They've got a lot of like sneaky tools. Meanwhile, just piling a load of high quality shots from the dread knights into them.
All right, and then Space Marines. I think this one comes down to the notorious the politically correct way of saying this, notorious newness of Space Marine players. I think they're maybe a little bit more susceptible to getting caught out by the kind of shenaniganry and tricks that the Grey Knights will pull out. So that one makes sense to me as well. In terms of worst performers, we got Custodes. What do you think of that one?
That's an interesting one because I've heard a lot of Grey Knight players say that actually it's a favoured matchup for the Grey Knights. So I mean that comes down from the fact that Dread Knights with their new side cannons, which are -2 ignoring cover 3 damage, are kind of like custom built to kill a normal custody. And the fact is they can keep dancing around, shooting, trying to stay out of arm's reach of the custodies, and then kind of as soon as the custodies get close, then they can, I know, like mists away or sigil or whatever. So you can see why the Grey Knights feel it's a favoured matchup. So I think it's probably one of those things where just Grey Knights are in general a hard army to play. And if you do just go, oh yeah, I've got Terminators, you got Terminators, let's have a punch up in the middle and that sort of thing. It's just you're obviously just going to lose in that. So I think maybe it's down to the Grey Knight players not quite playing it well because I would have expected it to be closer to the 50%.
Custodes notoriously very good at primary, and Grey Knights are not very good at primary, so I have to imagine that's a factor
Depends on
in
the
there as well.
builds, I guess. Yeah, I guess not many people are running 10-man Terminator and bit blobs and that sort of thing. So yeah, no, that's true.
I would also have to imagine that Custodes are quite good at killing Nemesis Dread Knights if they need to. So and we've got Tau Empire. So as a Tau player, it's just really easy to kill Terminators with Tau. It's the long and short of it. So and also the other thing is that it's quite easy to kill Nemesis Dread Knights because they're toughness 8, and Tau have like an absolute plethora of strength 8 weaponry, which normally is wounding vehicles and stuff on 5s. But obviously at this break point, it's a lot more valuable for them. So just their damage profiles are really well suited to getting into the Grey Knights. You also have stuff with stuff like breaches, getting out of transports, firing is very effective into most Grey Knight units. And then the fire and fade as well, which is also quite effective at preventing the primary denial shenanigans that Grey Knights may attempt. So that's a lot of tools there that are very effective into the Grey Knights. They just can't. Once you get through those sort of layers of like the sigil of exigence and those layers of defenses via movement that Grey Knights have, the units just don't stand up to Tau firepower really at all. Is what I found.
I actually played this matchup a week ago, 2 weeks ago, into one of our teammates, and it was very much. I felt like I was reasonably in the ascendancy for the 3 turns because I made 2 9-inch charges, and if those charges don't fail or if those charges fail, I had backups like, oh well, if I fail this charge, I can just sigil away next turn. But it's like those were the things that got me into the places, enabled me to start playing and denying the primary and that sort of thing. Then we got to turn 3, and I was like, oh, it's fine. This Terminator brick can just sit out here in the open. And, oh, it's dead. And it was just okay.
Yeah.
And we had that, didn't we, Jack, when we played many moons ago on TTS? And for 2 turns, you didn't get to shoot anything. And I was like,
Yeah.
do all the tricks in the world. And eventually it was like, oh, now I've got to rely on some 9-inch charges here, and they didn't go well. And then my army died. So yeah, you can definitely see how that, unless you play well consistently for 5 turns, you can see how that would be brutal for the Grey Knights.
Yeah, the Carry On Tower very much up until you win, you're losing army.
Yeah.
So it just comes out of nowhere. So that makes sense. Oh, the other thing as well is that Tau don't really have very easy for Tau to play around the miss of Deimos. Yeah, so because they're all ranged, they have to do any combat damage. So That's Locker. And then Astra Militarum, I have to imagine it's mainly the indirect situation.
Yeah.
You can have all the movement shenanigans in the world. You can hide behind as many walls as you like, but a Manticore hitting you in the face is going to kill some dudes. So
Yeah, my only experience of this is watching a tournament report recap of Jack Harpster playing. He played John Lennon's guard in the final, and Jack won unbelievably narrowly, but everything went in his favour. It was Purge the Foe. He got to go second. John hadn't played the matchup before and didn't really know what he was doing, and it was still super close. And Jack still finished the game with one Dread Knight left, and John still had a lot of his army left. As you said earlier, Grey Knights don't have a great ability in terms of killing, especially into vehicles.
Tank Commanders.
Yeah, so they're going to struggle there. So you can see why that's a problem.
Okay. So I think we covered that one pretty in depth. So next up is Most Wanted. We got some new stats. So what we got here is the top six units that are appearing in winning lists, basically. So we've got the Nemesis Dread Knight, the Terminator Squad, the Strike Squad, the Nemesis Grandmaster, Calor Drago himself, and the Brotherhood Librarian. We have how often they appear in lists, just tournament lists, as well as how often they appear in lists that were essentially one game of winning the event, basically. So starting off, the Nemesis Dread Knight appears in 85% of tournament lists and is in 82.35, because we'll see random amounts of games there, of X and 1 lists. So that number being very close together is kind of, I mean, that makes sense. That just everything's working out there.
Well, yeah, it's got the upgrade, hasn't it? And it's amazing. It's so interesting how one model, which no one was basically taking, essentially got an extra pip of AP and ignore cover, and suddenly you've got people spamming 6 of them. No, it's quite. It's just such a crazy world we live in. Like in terms of 40k, how so it seems at face value to not be that big a deal, and yeah, actually, it's meta defining almost.
Yeah. I mean, you take that example of Custodians, it pushes them from a 2-up save to a 4-up save.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
I mean, it's really night and day, isn't it? Next up, we've got the Terminator Squad, which appears in 70% of lists and 70% of X and 1 lists. Very common list. I would say you see them as 5-mans and you see them also as 10-mans. It's like different styles of lists there. Some more primary denial kind of attempts at lists and that sort of thing. I know when you were playing pre-Nemesis Dreadnought Busby, when we played, you favoured those.
Yeah, 20 of them, 2 10s and then 10 paladins. And yeah, they were it's just, when you've got OC30 and you've got the ways of playing around them, and they can heal back up now whilst in reserve, which is nice. And they've got lethal hits on the charge, so that does give you an ability to kind of deal with vehicles to some extent.
Okay. We got the Strike Squad, which appears in 70% of lists, and then only 64% of X and 1 lists. Pretty common, sort of, because they sticky objectives, don't they? That's their
Sticky
special.
and they scout. So you've got multiple layers there in terms of that first turn you can scout 6, you auto advance 6, so they've got that 18-inch move which can get them to maybe another one of the objectives to sticky and that sort of thing. So yeah, you generally 5 at a just that one unit 5 is just nice just to be a pain and just get some early stickies.
Then we've got the Nemesis Grandmaster, less popular than Nemesis Dread Knight itself, only in 65% of lists and almost 65% of X and 1 lists. Nemesis Grandmaster, the difference between him and the regular Nemesis Dread Knight, I know all his strats cost 1 CP for him, and he can
tactics, yeah. So it's basically he gets
reroll
Devils
wounds
for 1 CP. Yeah, so once about round he gets to reroll hits, wounds, and damage against monsters or vehicles. So if you take more than one, only one of them can do it. He's basically 25 more points. The thing that blows my mind a bit slightly is the fact that he still hits on 3s rather than 2s. So he has got exactly this in terms of weapon profile. He's identical. You're paying 25 points more for the CP reduction and the rerolls, which is relevant in some matchups. But the normal Dread Knights can advance, fall back, shoot, and charge. which the Grandmaster can't do. So that's why you will always see the Dread Knights and the Grandmaster. You hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I could quite easily replace it," and some people are still opting for them. But yeah, you can definitely see why the normal Dread Knights are more popular.
Yeah, and they've also got the downside of they give up assassinate as well as bring it
Yeah,
down. So
of course, yeah, yeah.
so Calor Drago only appears in 55% of lists, but he's in 64 percent of X1 lists. So not relatively unpopular as compared to some of these other choices of
Yeah,
but
he's a
still
beat
performs well.
stick. It gives you that charge, right? It gives you that once a battle +3 to your charge. So it's a 6-inch charge from Deep Strike. And I guess it depends on your build as we hit if as people go more into the MSU style thing and they're not actually that bothered about trying to hit 9-inch charges. I guess that style of list he's not going to be as important, and that's when you're going to hit the librarians compared to the 10-man brick, which you do want to try and get into a charge early. In which case, then yeah, he's gonna find his place.
And then last we have the Brotherhood Librarian, which, while it appears in 85% of Grey Knight's lists, only in 52% of lists that have gone X and 1 at events, which is really interesting because I think it's very common. A lot of people are taking it, but it's not actually doing well, essentially, even though people are taking it a lot. Brotherhood Librarian is a sort of mortal wound machine. That's what it is. His main function. He just throws out mortal wounds
Yeah.
and carries things like the Sigil of Exigence and stuff like that. So
Yeah, there's so many ways you can play him. I mean, a lot of people run him in 5-mans or kind of like potentially on their own. I mean, I've heard it discussed quite a lot, and it's one of those things where when you look at Vortex are doing, you're like, oh, that's amazing. Like that's going to be, that's. And I remember when we played Jack, and the first time I used it, I rolled a 6, and I got to do 2d6 mortal wounds. I did like 8 mortal wounds to a devilfish. I was like, this thing is incredible. And then the next time, I stuck his nose out and rolled the average, which was 4 mortal wounds into something. And then that Terminator Squad just got lit up, and he was like, "Well, actually, I mean, adding him to a 5-man is all well and good. I mean, that he actually went up in points, but like things on his own, he drops down. On average, he does 4 mortal wounds and then dies. It's like, well, is that actually worth the? I can't remember exactly what it is, but well over 100 points of just for 4 mortal wounds on average. So you can see potentially why at face value he looks good, but actually in the successful lists, which are trimming the fat a bit more, he probably doesn't actually quite find his place. And you're seeing now a lot more people running the Grandmaster on foot, especially in sort of 10-man units, because he ignores modifiers. And there are these scary things called Catan running around who like to be half damage and that sort of thing. So with all these big, tough, scary things around, having someone who ignores modifiers is really helpful.
yeah, I mean, back in the days when the worst thing we had to worry about in terms of resilience was the Incarn,
Yeah.
mortal wounds were great. But now we have Stan to worry about, and they've got a Feel No Pain as well, so that's less effective. I never thought I'd be sad to not see the Satan as the Incarn on the board. I'd never thought I'd wish for those days back, but here we
Yeah.
are. Yeah, so that might just be like a slow list adaptation thing. But so they are common. So if you are playing into Grey Knights, you are quite likely to see the Brotherhood Librarian. It's just unlikely to be on the top tables, from what we can see from the information there. All right. So we've got an example list here. This is Ed Watt's list from the South Coast Super Major. He does have some Brotherhood Librarians in his list. He is one of the 52%. He's got 2 librarians, one with the sigil of exigence. Do you just explain what that one does, Chris? Just because we've mentioned it a few
Yeah,
times.
so when your unit is targeted in shooting phase, you can either move 6 inches or you can redeploy somewhere else. So it's kind of you know, you can thrust it in a unit in your enemy's face very early on and know that you're going to be able to safely pick them up and then vanish away.
Because they go back into reserves, right?
Yeah, but so they immediately come down somewhere else. So it's like a teleport.
Yeah. Okay. Then we've got the Brotherhood Tech Marine. which is here to buff the
He's also
inevitable
super
Nemesis
cheap as a
Dreadnoughts.
character. The tech marine is only 60 points, so that's quite nice value.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got a Grandmaster with Inescapable Wrath, which is +1 to your charge rolls, if I remember correctly. We've got 3 units of 5 Terminators with Incinerators, Banners, and Narthesiums. Incinerators, they're a +1 strength heavy flamer, right? I think I remember that right?
6, -1, 1 damage, ignore cover.
Yeah, the Banners additional OC, and then Narthesium allows you to.
Bring back
Is
a
it
model.
bring back guys, or is it Field of Pain?
Yeah,
Okay.
so now it's in reserve as well, which is nice. So because beforehand you'd have had to have kept your Terminators on the board to have one come back in your command phase. Now you can pick the unit up and then one comes back in. So when you teleport down, you've got that additional model. And we all know that sticking one model out on an objective, getting blatted, picking him up, and then regrowing it back onto the objective next turn. We all know that stuff, and it's something they can definitely do.
Okay. Then we've got the Strike Squad with Incinerator again. Probably some home objective holding, I have to imagine here.
Yeah,
Sticking your home
TP.
objective in Grey Knights, I imagine, is very valuable since everything can go teleport all over the place.
Yep.
We've got 2 Inceptor Squads. So Inceptor Squads, they're similar to the Strike Squads, they're just a bit faster. Do you want to break those ones down quickly, Chris?
Yeah, so they move 12, and more importantly, they fire and fade. So they can shoot and scoot, which, as we all know, is an incredibly powerful ability. You drop down 9, you fire, you then move. I can't remember if it's 5 or 6, but then you just can get onto the objective and all that sort of thing. So they're great for mission play.
Great for clearing off those screening units as well, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And then rounding out the list, we have 3 Nemesis Dreadknights with Incinerator, Side Cannons, and Great Hammers.
Yeah, they're everywhere, and that's the optimum loadout you'll find. No one's going to be running silencers. There's not really a debate in terms of Great Hammer or sword. The Great Hammer is in general just better than the sword with the heavy hit, and it also means you've got a much better tank shock. Because you're rolling more dice, because it's like strength 10 for the sword, strength 14 for the Great Hammer, I think, or something like that. So you've got a much better tank shock. The sweep for the sword is rubbish, so you're going to see that. So yeah, so that is the loadout you'll always come across there.
Okay. So this list, I'm pretty sure Ed went down in the last round of Surf Coast Youth
Final,
Major.
didn't you?
Yeah.
Or
Sorry, what was that?
he either got to the semis or the final.
Yeah, it was pretty close. But I remember reading about it the other day. But if you want to see him talk about his sort of his list in Grey Knights in general, we've got the state of play for Grey Knights that are coming up with him. So we can talk about that. It's worth tuning in for that.
It'll be either before this episode or after this episode. Who knows?
Oh yes,
That's
it's all in the
exciting.
ether. We have no idea. I wasn't going to put a date on it, but
It's either before or after. So
Yeah.
either you're like, I've already seen it, guys, or you're really excited to see it. But yeah, that would be a good episode.
All right. So tips and tricks. This is going to be sort of where the most discussion about Grey Knights is going to come into it, because there's a lot of stuff to cover with Grey Knights. They have a lot of tricks, which I think is what people like about them so much. So in terms of stratagems, what do you think the most the sort of key stratagems there are? They do have the classic armor of contempt equivalent with true silver armor. And we've spoken about Mists of Deimos, which is the 1 CP move a unit into move unit 6 inches or put it back into strategic reserves. But the other 4 we've got, are there any other that are worth bringing up or talking about?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, so mist is the most important thing. Like, you've just got to think about mist at all time when you're moving. Do you want to get within 9 inches of this unit? And the way you're going to try and play around that is, can you line up a charge if you're a combat army into 2 different units? They can only mist one away. So when you're looking at where they've placed their units, are you able to position yourself in such a way that you can kind of threaten multiple units so that reduce the effectiveness of mists? And the other thing you need to think about with mists is that they pick them up, they're in deep strike, they can then be rapid ingress down. and so they can get picked up, and then so imagine a situation where you've done all your movement, and then you go and trigger miss, and they pick up and they can go somewhere, and like, aha, I can go here and you can't shoot me. So a big thing to think out is if you're planning on moving within 9 inches, try and do that early, just so you know, oh, they have picked up, now I need to plan the rest of my movement accordingly. In terms of other stratagems, they've got one which gives you +1 to hit when you drop down, or it also gives you assault, so that can just be used for doing actions, advancing actions. They also advance 6, so that's very good. A big one, which is no longer a battle tactic, 2 CP, so it is expensive. And again, Grey Knights are really CP intensive, so if you can draw out the CP, you will reduce some of their tricks. But this is Lone Op. And this is really good for being like, okay, I'm going to drop down this unit of Terminators onto this objective, and then I'm going to spend 2 CP. They have to do it upon dropping down. It's not when you like, a lot of the other Lone Op strats are when targeted. This isn't. This is you drop down, and then you say, right, and this is now Lone Opt. And then they'll carry on playing their turn. Then it'll go to your turn, and you know that they are Lone Opt. But that's a really powerful one, but again, it is 2 CP. They might well do it once a battle, but that's probably going to be it.
That's haloed in Soulfire for anyone who is following along at home.
And everyone's favourite 3-inch deep strike. Oh yeah, we will have that one. Prognosticated arrival. Only 1 CP. I mean, 10 Terminators turning up on your doorstep, or a Dread Knight with a Flamer or whatever. And I think we've probably spoken about this on other shows before, but you can't, unless you've got Unending Swarm, you can't block out 3-inch deep strikes everywhere. So it's about placing value on where do you want them to go. And just be aware of maybe them, you going, oh, they can't fit 10 Terminators in a block here at 3 inches away. No, but they might well be able to create a snake of a line of 10 inches with the Terminators, and then have a nice, massive, wide area to cover. So as soon as you move anything around that area, boom, they've disappeared with Mr. Deimos. So just be aware of kind of like leaving enough room for like 1 Terminator to get through. And it's the usual thing of how you're going to defend your objectives from 3-inch deep strikes. Make sure you've got something with a decent sized base sat in the middle to cover out that kind of area.
Yeah, that's where the sort of traditional advice of put something with a 40mm base or larger on the center of an objective, just so they can't have any 3-inch deep strikes to sneak that off from you.
100%. We've got Radiant Strike, which is, again, it's 2 CP. It gives you devastating wounds. You won't see a huge amount, apart from the fact that when you've got like a Grandmaster or whatever that's giving you a free stratagem, that's the battle tactic to use. I think that's the only battle tactic. So maybe the Terminator brick will get dev wounds once a battle, and that can be nasty. And there's one.
I know demon players really hate that one with Drago.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the one niche. So Drago has anti-demon 2+. Give him dev wounds, and then every 2+ he rolls to wound is 3 mortal wounds or 3 dev wounds. So that is obviously that's it. And then finally, as you said, Jack, you've got True Silver Armor, which is your 1 CP armor condemned. The entire Grain army is on a 2-up. So if you sit them in cover and armor contempt, you've got to be AP3 just to put them on a 3-up. And that's why Grey Knight. I mean, I keep talking in terms of the 10 mans because that's how I'm playing. So if you're playing into these 10 mans, they will be trying to give. If you've got, so my list has 2 10 mans, I'll be only ever trying to show you 1 10 man, because then that gives me options to mist, sigil if they're that sigil unit, or true sit in cover and have the true silver armor. And then that's just going to make them like really, really tanky. When you've got MSU, obviously it's more about trying to enable yourself to shoot multiple targets, overload, so that the true silver armor, you've shot one thing into them and they've done it, but now you can redirect and shoot elsewhere. And those are kind of like the main strategies.
Yeah. Something else probably I would say to bring up is if the opponent has Sigil of Exigence, which they probably will because it's by far the best enhancement the Granites have access to, try and get out early. Don't be afraid to just not shoot a unit because they have Sigil of Exigence, because you'd rather have them use it early in the game then have it. When you do, the last thing you want is to be on like the last turn of the game and they're sat on a primary and you can't get rid of them because you won't be able to shoot them because you only have one activation into them left in the game, and they're just going to disappear. That's the last thing you want. So yeah, try and get that out early if you can. You just got to commit. You just got to bite the bullet and get it done. Because if you don't, they're probably just going to go back into reserve anyway. So with the Grey Knights detachment rule. Okay. The other thing you can do is tagging units in combat. The Grey Knight detachment rule allows units, I believe it's up to 3 units, to go into reserve at the end of the opponent's turn. So, but they can't do that if they're in engagement range of the enemy. So if you can tag them in combat, it's worth doing. Obviously, easier said than done, as we were talking about playing around Mr. Deimos. It's not a particularly easy thing to do, but it's definitely possible. Also, being in combat with Grey Knights or Grey Knights have 10 Grey Knights Terminators, not necessarily something you want, but that is a play that you can make if you have to, because a lot of the time that will, if that works, if you can engineer that, like charging a vehicle in or something, that's going to severely disrupt the Grey Knights plans.
Yeah, their entire combat. It doesn't matter what they've got: Terminator, Paladin, Strike, whatever. It is strength 6 minus 2 damage. So that's not great into vehicles. So as Jack says, like tagging with vehicles is a really good way of meaning that you are probably going to survive.
Yeah. As I mentioned before, Grey Knight's very good at the secondary game. So a lot of the time it's going to be nearly impossible to stop them maxing out those secondaries. So a lot of times it's easier to play heavily on the primary as more of a focus. So yeah, concentrating on primary can be a bit more effective for pulling out wins against the Grey Knights. I think that's about it. I think that's everything that I had there. Is there anything else? Any other tricks that you can think of off the top of your head, Chris, that I've missed there?
There's one trick I really like, which is you charge in your Terminator. So again, like whatever unit you want to miss, but let's say it's the 10-man. You charge them into something, chop it up, and then consolidate into something else, so that when it falls back, you can mist away. Or you just don't get shot. And so when you're playing into like Tau, that can be quite a nice thing. Charge in to the vehicle, chop up the vehicle, and then tag into the breaches or whatever pathfinder, whatever's nearby, and then when they fall back, you get to mist away, and those sorts of plays are really valuable. So just be thinking about spreading your forces out. And that leans into what Jack put on the screen, which is the deep strikes. Like, yes, they can get in with 3 inches, but still generally they're going to be coming down 9 inches away. It's frustrating. You have to be thinking about the game the whole time, those whole 5 turns, but keep thinking about it's even on turn 1, right? Like you go first, and then at the end of your first turn, they get to pick up 3 units and come down. And so you do just have to be switched on all the time for the deep strikes. And it's why the Grey Knights can be so potent, because they're mentally draining you. You're having to constantly be thinking not just about your game plan and what you want to be doing, but also trying to stop them as well.
Yeah. All right. So I think that's pretty much everything that we as a good primer for playing against Grey Knights. Beyond the stuff that we've already covered, the sort of generic anti-Terminator stuff is the way to go. The kind of anti-Terminator weapons are what you're going to be wanting to be packing for Grey Knights. They are, fortunately for me, or maybe not for me because I'm a Tau player, but fortunately for my brain, Grey Knights are not massively common in the meta as of right now. But that may start going up and up with the success that they seem to be having. So
A lot of people do have them, don't they? And
yeah,
I think at time of recording, a current trend is people are running 3 to 4 Dread Knights, but also people are now starting to hammer the all vehicle build. And we at the time of recording, it's just coming up is a Manchester Super Major, and you've got two of the best players in the country, Vic and Manny, and they're running something like 5-6 Dread Knights and 3 Land Raider Redeemers. You're hearing stories of, I think the German team took to an event a bunch of Dread Knights and Canis Rex. So you will start to see these, and it sounds like we're heading towards a bit of a vehicle meta anyway. So don't be surprised if you do stumble into all of the Dread Knights and all of the Redeemers, because that is a lot of flamers. That is a lot of body. So not many people are going to have a good time into that. If you're a teams player, might well be that this sort of build becomes like the vehicle build that you're seeing in teams. So that is something to keep an eye on. I think that's an interesting part, considering Grey Knights don't have that many data sheets. Actually, you've kind of got this all Terminator build with big blocks. You've got the MSU, just a load of stuff being a massive pain in the ass, or you've got this vehicle skew. So there's lots of different things to watch out for.
All right. That is really it now for good, honest. So thank you very much, Chris, for joining me. Thank you everyone for watching. As I mentioned before, if you guys like what we're doing, you can go down below. You can subscribe to us. You can like the video, put a comment if you want to see us cover something specific as a particular faction you want us to cover. You can do that as we did this week for the comment we received last week. And if you are interested in getting videos a bit earlier or just looking to support us, you can get YouTube memberships. Give you a bunch of emojis and emotes and stuff for the live streams that we do every week on a Tuesday. So with that, we'll call it there. Thank you again, Chris, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.